Welcome in to Underrated with one of your co-hosts, Fran, introducing the podcast. This episode we are back down under, looking at two Australian bands, INXS and The Go-Betweens, chosen by, I guess, the editor and founder of Gods and the TV, and we had a lovely discussion about two mighty fine bands. But did all of us agree that they were underrated or overrated? Why not keep listening and find out?
Welcome to the Underrated podcast with Fran and Babs. Is it over or underrated?
It's another episode of Underrated with Fran and Babs. I am Babs, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Fran. How are we doing, Fran?
I have just finished Pilates, and I'm ready to podcast. I believe all the big podcasters have a Pilates and a meal deal beforehand, so I'm drinking my innocent smoothie. And Babs is jealous of the UK meal deals. Sorry, Babs.
Yes. You missed us talking about the price of food in Belgium and the price of food in the UK. Aren't you jealous that you missed out on that? But I do also have a Pilates-related story because, Fran, I have just come back from the osteopath who told me that I can now do Pilates again because, I should do it for the good of my back and only stop if I feel pain. So there we go. Look at us. The back pain broadcasters, Fran and Babs.
Two young, crazy kids with back pain. So, Babs, I should probably ask you, what have you been listening to this week?
I have been listening to music related to the last two gigs I went to. So on Friday, I went to Botanique and saw Jockstrap, who were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Crowd a bit crap, but there we go. But on Monday, I went to see Yaeji and her amazing support act, George Riley, one of the best support acts I've ever seen. And that was really phenomenal. The Belgian crowd was really warm. I'm getting the feeling that I think cold Belgian crowds are normally for rock concerts because there's a bit more electro and a bit more pop in AAG. They're a bit more willing to get involved. But even from the support act, which was just this person George Riley and their I was gonna say their synths, the little machine that I don't know the name of. They were getting really involved and she was really chatty and the crowd were like responding to her and I was like, I've never seen this. And Yaeji and Jockstrap might come up in my kind of top albums and top songs of the year, but I would really shout out George Riley for her very genre blending, kind of somewhere between pop, electro, rap and R&B, like hints of Azalea Banks, but also something a bit softer. It's really, really good stuff. What about you?
Do you have like a song for a starting point for her at all? Or?
For George Riley? Well, the one that I saved first is one called SEX. So there we go. Start with that if you want to get a bit naughty, but if you want something a bit more smooth, maybe her song Desire.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I've not been listening to anybody who's a new artist. I have been listening to today of a band called The Cheaters with a song called The Swan from like 2014, maybe.
It's Cheaters, CHEA, right?
Yeah.
I know those guys.
It's all very shoegazy. It came up like a song on my like best of something. I thought, oh yeah, shit, that song. So that's on repeat for the last 2 days. And for some reason, I had like a deep dive on the Wonder Stuff and decided I need to listen to every single Wonder Stuff album. And that's been my week.
Their EP Murasaki, I've just gone to look it up. I really love that EP and it's been a while since I've listened to it. So thank you, Fran, for reawakening that.
For Cheaters. But we should probably introduce our guests for today. We are not alone. We have Bill Cummings from Gods in the TV podcast, magazine, online. Anything else I need to mention, Bill?
Show Me Magic is the podcast we do. But,
Show Me Magic.
God is in the TV zine is the website I've been doing for 20 years. So yeah.
Wow, 20 years, impressive.
Well, yeah, there's a bit of a story to it. I mean, I started off as a student journalist and I used to just put my reviews online. And this was in the era before blogs. So it was kind of in the webzine, drowning sound sort of era. And then other people joined me and over the years it's got more professional. And now we're still here still going. We're an independent platform, really, for artists and writers, I suppose.
But yeah, so Bill, have you been listening to anything particular this week?
Yeah, apart from the artists we're discussing, I've been listening to Kareem Bailey Ray's album, which
Okay.
is quite surprising, considering what I knew her for, sort of breezy soul pop. This one is just, there's a love of punk there that she delves into. Sort of alt pop, soul. It's a real melting pot. It's one of the albums of the year, I think, actually. And another band I've been listening to, a German synth pop band called Sparkling. And they're really fun, just sort of like really refreshing, upbeat stuff. Like I was trying to think what you'd compare them to, maybe sort of junior senior meets OMD or something really just like uplifting, which is not always my bag, but sometimes it's cool to, And probably the third thing, Blonde Shell. Have you heard of this album?
No.
Yeah, it's an artist called Blonde Shell from America, and yeah, it's kind of 90s influenced, I guess. Sort of a bit of grunge there, but
yes, I saved her song Veronica Mars. I just looked this up. Yes.
Yeah, and there's a couple. There's one called Salad, and it's basically about a sort of a flight of fancy of poisoning your other half, basically. But I think there's a sort of a deeper, darker thing about he's been trying to control her, if that makes sense. So there's and it's just a really well produced album, excellent songwriting. Probably you compare maybe Sharon Van Etten or something like that.
Okay.
Previously discussed on the podcast on our indie folk episode, yes.
We have brought Bill here to discuss two bands, as we always do. We have the theme of Australia, yes.
Yeah.
Again.
Part 3.
Who knew we'd have 3 episodes on Australia? And so we have an overrated band who I like, and Bill has chosen an underrated band that I didn't know much about. So can you introduce your 2 bands, Bill?
It's INXS and The Go-Between.
Mm-hmm.
Overrated.
So, Bill, INXS, what your thoughts around the seminal Australian 80s/90s band?
I quite like them. I mean, I suppose
seriously, it's completely fine to like a great band.
I suppose the only I was trying to think of like a criticism you could have of INXS really, but I think they're really energetic, fun songs, especially their sort of commercial peak. But I suppose delving a bit more into their back catalogue and stuff, I would say maybe a bit there is a bit of a comparison with the Go-Betweens in terms of they both took a while to get to to hit their stride, if that makes sense. And they're both sort of that kind of new wave. Probably the Go-Betweens much more esoteric early on, but they're both of that new wave pop thing, from Australia at the beginning. And then they sort of found their voice and found what they were really good at, I think. And I think INXS maybe, I don't know what you would say, but I think maybe Kick and X are like albums that are probably for me, like just listening back to their stuff, are like ahead of everything else they did. And there's a lot of great singles they've got, like the one you picked out, which I think should have been on the playlist, actually, Don't Change, which was probably the first one that really made me think, actually, yeah, they've got something that's original, if that makes sense. Because some of the other ones I listened to earlier on were maybe a bit more bluesy rock, sort of almost Huey Lewis and the News sound. Something like Listen Like Thieves. And then there's other tracks that are almost like trying to be almost 80s new wave, kind of almost Duran Duran. I thought I was hearing on some of their early stuff, but then they really hit their stride, didn't they, with Kick, I think, which is a cracking album, I think. And I think the strength of Michael Hutchins' personality is, and this is probably going to be a question I'm going to ask later, but the strength of his personality is almost what makes there's obviously good songwriting there as well, but his personality really does make them stand out, I think, and it's kind of stamped all over everything, isn't it? Really.
I mean, I guess most people in the world cannot name another member of INXS because of that.
Well,
It was Michael Hutchins being the
funnily
charisma
enough, I could
magnet.
because I saw that. I don't know if you remember. There was after Michael Hutchins died, they did like a
The reality
reality
TV
show. Yeah, and I saw that. So
I did not see that. What's that? What
yeah,
was that about?
It was American, wasn't it? And it's to find
yeah,
a replacement for Michael Hutchins.
it
Oh
was. Yeah,
God,
X Factor
yes,
style.
that does ring a
it
bell.
was
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
VH1. And I think it was the Farris brothers, wasn't it, who were part of the judging team? Yeah, and so they found a guy called JD, didn't they? Who was the Canadian singer who kind of took over for JD Fortune, his name was. He took over till 2011, and then they went on another year with somebody else, and then they packed it in. So, yeah, I've mixed feelings about that with Queen. They're carrying on when you're so identified with one singer. I have kind of mixed feelings on that. It's almost, can you really carry on when will you ever be, you know what I mean? Will you ever be what you were when you've lost your iconic frontman? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, you can get away with it if it's only been 2 or 3 years into your career, but
Well, Fran, we did do Meridian, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but exactly. So, can you name a
I mean,
hit?
I didn't really like them, but yeah,
people would not know a song after Fish left the band, though. So
Yeah.
if it's
don't
Genesis
say that to the
or
fans who go to Centre Parks. But yes, okay.
yeah, I think you can probably do it after a few years, but yeah, after 20 years, it's impossible. I think Genesis tried to do it again, didn't they, in the late
Well,
90s?
Stranglers have done it, and they
Yeah,
did well. I've seen
it's
them
not
live.
impossible.
But,
It's
yeah.
just, I suppose, when it's so indelible, isn't it, as Freddie Mercury or Michael Hutchins, it's very hard to separate the two. I think it's not to say you can't carry on, but I feel like there's almost, not to be too harsh on Queen, but I feel like there's almost like, how long can you go on for, guys?
So, Babs, INXS, what do you know? Do you know much more than Kick or?
Well, my first introduction to them was their greatest hits.
Okay.
I only listened to Kick for the first time about 3 years ago or something like that. So yeah, they were a family-friendly band. If you listen to the podcast, you know that my family fought a lot over music. INXS was acceptable for both mum and dad. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I only really started exploring beyond that a few years ago. I had no idea they had an album called Shabu Shuba. I could not believe it. Obviously, we mentioned Michael Hutchins is iconic. He's gorgeous, and that tragic figure thing that kind of haunts the spectre of the band, I guess. And I think Fran, you and I previously, either on or offline, I can't remember, talked about the amazing Richard Lowenstein documentary Mystify, which talked about his life. I don't know if you've seen that, Bill.
Yeah, it's very touching. And I suppose I was going to ask a question off that, because it's almost like I really enjoyed it. But is there a touch of sort of over romanticism about films like that? Because it's almost, because of his untimely death, does that kind of give INXS a sort of I don't know, sort of a tragic romantic vibe? Do you know what I mean? When you listen back to them in a way, that's just a question I'm hanging out there.
It's a good question, but actually, I don't. When I listen to the music, well, let's say 4 out of the 5 of the songs on your playlist, I don't feel that. With one of them, maybe a bit more, because I mean, I think I'm going to be saying throughout this chat, Michael Hutchins is fit as hell, and he's so sexy, and that comes across so obviously in a lot of the songs that I do focus on that more than
There's still quite a few people who still think that he died through his autoasphyxiation. Yeah, but I think after you see the documentary, you then realise obviously he had that brain injury and led to depression. Well, I guess both bands have lost a singer as well, so that's another link. So I got into INXS by complete accident. So I used to work in a luggage shop back in the 90s. And
not a record shop. I thought that was going to be the usual. Okay.
I say luggage, it also sold handbags, and I got piss taken out of me. But anyway, they'd have one of those tapes which the company would send down because you couldn't play your own music, and it had one song on it, and I thought it was INXS, so I bought the best of INXS and was pissed off when that song was on it. It turned out later that song was Break It Down Again by Tears of Fears. So I don't know how I mistake Tears of Fears for INXS, but when I bought the best of INXS, I did then get into them, and I slowly would buy albums on for £1 from a secondhand shop occasionally, and found my way into INXS, and I bought the videos and all sorts. But I never really liked much of the pre-Kick era. I mean, I like Shabu Shabad because I'm a bit of a new wave, and I kind of like the art punky. I think when they first came out, they were a bit more pub rock
Yeah.
I think they played with Noel. What is it? Noel Rodgers.
Yeah, is it Listen Like Thieves,
Yeah.
isn't it?
No, I think he did Original Sin. Had that keyboard motif for it, and then after that, they then did Listen Like Thieves, and they had a hit with What You Need. I think was their first
Oh, right, okay.
funk hit in like America and the UK, and then then Kick Off became like massive success. And I didn't love X. I thought X felt like a Kick Part Two
Mm.
for me. It's got some great songs, and obviously
Yeah.
we're going to mention some songs today. And then I really loved their own Acton Baby. You know how like
Yeah.
band in the 90s had to change their image and everything, and so their Acton Baby is it whatever wherever you are? I can't remember what the title is.
Welcome to whatever.
Welcome to Wherever You Are, yeah, and that was one of my favorite albums from 1992, guys. But I think that was number one in the UK, and by then they'd lost America because I guess America moved on to like grunge and all sorts. And then I think the band just slipped down slowly. And what is really weird is like that band played Wembley Stadium in 1991. And by like 1994, Noel Gallagher was calling Michael Hutchence a has-been on the Brits. It's like it's been 3 years since they played Wembley Stadium. So it's like amazing how far they stood down.
I suppose that rock thing, as in rock, kind of went out of fashion, didn't it? Because you could also think of a totally different band, but you could also think of how big Guns N' Roses were in the sort of early 90s. And then suddenly grunge, Nirvana just certainly sort of punctured that really in a way. Although they were still, around, but yeah, it's the zeitgeist, isn't it? I guess that moved on.
Yeah, and I think for INXS even tried to be a bit more rocky.
Yeah.
The song "The Gift" is their answer to grunge, I guess, in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was never really going. Yeah, I like it, but yeah,
I like Gift. Yeah.
But I think when Elegant and Wasted came out, I think it got to like number 16 in the UK charts, and it's pretty much over. Who knows what would have happened if Michael had lived on. But yeah, I think it's sad because he co-wrote most of the songs with Andrew Farriss, and I feel sorry that he's not used at all. Like he must be a great songwriter.
Yeah,
it's sad that I've not really heard of him ever writing with anyone, or So yeah, that's a bit unfair. But yeah, if you go into your playlist, so we asked Bill to choose 5 songs for him to chat about, to discuss if the bands are overrated. and we've been listening to his playlist all week or all day, depending on how much research you've done. So, Bill, what's your first track on your playlist?
New Sensation.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's sort of a really energetic, exciting song, really, isn't it? It just really bursts out the speakers, and that's kind of it's almost emblematic, isn't it? We're the new sensation, almost. It's like, it's sort of exclaiming what they were at the time. It's interesting. There probably is a bit of a you were talking about the tracks they did with Nile Rodgers on the Swing. Yeah, it was the Swing album. But yeah, there's maybe a bit of that in this as well, with the sort of choppy guitars and stuff. And where the only thing I found with the Nile Rodgers stuff that they did with him, it's almost a bit generic Nile Rodgers, like the guitars almost. Whereas this, I feel like it's got a bit more punch to it. And I suppose Kick is that, isn't it? It's got like those sort of big sounds.
Yeah, Jordan's drums are huge. I heard like that the record label were scared of it because they thought that it wouldn't fit in with the modern music.
Yeah.
So they had to like send it to like college radio first to test out. Then suddenly they then allowed it to be put onto the mainstream radio. But yeah, they're scared of like, I don't know, I guess it's a funk rock in a way, maybe.
Yeah.
I adore New Sensation. I described it as like for Red Bull or pop, just gives you an instant hit when it comes on, because he's straight in, isn't he, with it? And it's got the crunching drums I love. It's even stronger live. Is it just the whole song? Is it just 3 chords? Is it dun 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 dun? It's just simple, works. I mean, I'm not a big fan of sax, and that can be a hindrance in the world of an INXS. I think Michael Hutchence says trumpet on it as a piss take because apparently Tim Farriss wanted to play a trumpet solo, but then Kurt said no, I'm the sax player. So technically, that's why he says trumpet in the song. And I always wanted to know that. But the video's interesting. It's got that weird animation thing happening. It's a solid track. I wish this was played more than the other hit we're going to talk about next. But there seems to be 2 songs in this album you constantly hear, and this seems to be pushed aside a little bit alongside Mystify, which I think is brilliant. But Babs,
yeah. So this isn't one of my INXS favorites. Basically, right. I will say now, I don't dislike any songs on this playlist, but there's ones I like more and ones I like less. Because I think the drums are quite repetitive and boring. Actually, I don't like them. So I wonder if live it does sound a bit different. I also hadn't really thought about the fact that that rhythm guitar at the beginning sounds a lot like U2, which we've done this season. I was like, I've never made that comparison between U2 and INXS, but there's another song coming up where I was like, oh yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think the brass section is really nicely and sparsely used. I love his voice and the effect on it and the vocal oohs and ahs. Yeah, it's very catchy, but it's not, if I had one of 5 songs to play to you to introduce you to INXS, this wouldn't be one of mine, but it's decent.
Okay, so moving on to, I guess, their most well-known tune. And did Professor Green cover it as well in the past 10 years?
Oh God, I hope not. Sorry, that's really harsh.
I feel like he did.
Yeah.
So Bill, what's your next pick?
It's Need You Tonight. And there's definitely a nod to Prince on this one, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did look up when Sign of the Times came out to see the... but I Want to Be Your Lover as well is another one where he really uses that staccato sort of funky riff. And you can definitely hear that. And I put Michael Hutchins got lustful delivery that snakes.
Oh yeah,
that snakes over the whole track. And
that was his first take. That was
really wow.
No.
Again, we were talking about force of personality, but he definitely sort of stamps it all over this one. There's just a real sort of hunger about it in lots of ways. Take that how you like. I think it's a great track, really. I mean, you do hear it a lot. You're right, and that's probably the next one as well. You hear them a lot, and that probably is the comparison with U2 in a way. At that point, they were just everywhere, weren't they? It's like FM radio just on rotation. A lot of these tracks, and that can be a problem sometimes when you've heard something so many times, you just get sick of it. But I still think it sounds cool. And the only thing you would say maybe slightly dated is that kind of, I don't know if it's like a drum machine or is it like just drums or you could say that's slightly dated, but I don't know. It's a funny one, dated again, because it's just down to subjective, isn't it? I got a friend who's like 80s production is horrible, but actually some 80s production is fantastic. It just depends. But yeah, it's a pretty cool tune, yeah. And I suppose it shows off a bit more of that like funky side of them, which is part of the INXS sort of cocktail, isn't it? The funk is a big thing of when they really hit their stride, I think, because like the first 2 or 3 albums, as we said, they were sort of finding what their
even his voice is different. I think Babs was quite surprised about his like almost David Bowie delivery in those days.
It's kind of like a new wave thing, isn't there? Yeah. And I think a lot of bands went through that, U2 as well, and REM, all like they started off sort of more new wavy, post-punky, and then they sort of found their own.
And I guess when you first start singing, you're going to be copying the songs you like. Definitely. So obviously, he's probably listening to Bowie and Brian Ferry and Talking Heads. So it makes sense. It takes a while to get your own confidence. So
sure.
I put down Prince. I put down. This sounds like 3 songs put together. You've got like a cool synth backing track. Then you've got Prince, and you've got that guitar riff on top. It's like 3 cut and paste sort of thing. Yeah. Apparently, the backing track, that drum beat was from the original demo. It's one of those things when they got to the studio, spent like a week trying to get some decent like drum machines, and then they fucking used the one on his home studio tape. You hear 2 or 3 seconds and you instantly know this is INXS Need You Tonight. This is one of those perfect tricks. But I mean, I probably now skip this because I've heard it far too much. Yeah, this made him Who stars across the world, and he's even got his pet rat in the video, and that's a guy who's got rats. Thank you very much. Babs, thoughts on Need You Tonight?
Guys, this is one of my top 100 songs of all time.
Of all time?
Of all time. Like, I agree with you both that it is played a lot, and I've also seen it on music TV a lot, but I will never get sick of this song. It is one of the sexiest songs of all time. Him saying, "Come over here." It's like, sorry, that sounded horrendous, but it's an early example of kind of ASMR is what I wrote down. Never has a man breathing in sounded so sexy. He goes, "Oh," And you're like, well, yeah. It's so I think I obviously I heard this very young and it had a big impression. That's definitely a part of it because I would have heard this I'm pretty certain as a child. But I think, yeah, Bill, you mentioned the kind of the lust and the restraint and the interplay between all the different instruments works amazingly. I love the harmonizing that comes in and out and the false ending we talked about on other episodes as well. And yeah, what I read was that this was a bit of a throwaway song. Like Andrew came up with the riff, he wrote some lyrics. It wasn't something that was really thought about. But no, I adore the song. What the documentary did as well, it's like I haven't watched it since it came out, but he really doesn't he feels like your average rock star in the swagger and the voice and everything else, but personality wise he actually seems like quite a sensitive kind person, and especially having Helena Christensen and Kylie Minogue talking so fondly about him as an ex-boyfriend. That's not every rock star ex-boyfriend, I'm sure.
He doesn't seem like he's sort of bringing his ego on a tour bus or something.
No, and I think his first girlfriend was like a teenage poet or something like that. I don't know, he seemed like a really cool dude. It's very sad.
Which is hard to be when you're really famous or being really famous.
Michael Hutchence struggled a lot mentally with the success of Kick, and he wasn't ready to become that big a pop star.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he is naturally a shy guy, and I think he also said that he had really bad eyesight, and that's how he could perform live because he literally couldn't see the crowd.
Underrated.
Maybe moving on to your next pick and probably the other biggest single.
Yeah. Never Tear Us Apart.
I
mean, yeah, it's a really big ballad, isn't it? It's the big strings and I suppose the video really makes it as well.
Yeah.
You can't forget that. It's an excellent vocal as well. Although the production maybe now I listen back to it, it's almost a little bit sort of middle of the road, maybe. But then it's a ballad and it's, and I like that stop in the middle of it as well. And that big note, I think the video almost makes it in a way. There's an element of like sort of getting to know him a bit more as well than some of the other livelier tracks, if that makes sense. The kind of, like we were saying, the sensitive artist.
Sensitive, gorgeous man.
Yeah.
The ideal type.
Well, he was. And there's a kind of Jim Morrison almost kind of vibe to him in some ways. But maybe less pretentious.
I think he said that he wanted to make a rock ballad, but without doing the cliches of other rock ballads, which is why he probably doesn't say love in the chorus.
Interesting.
On purpose. Because obviously, it's a synth sample of strings at the start, the dun dun, and maybe that would sound better if it actually had a string quartet. The video version, I like the video version because it's got a longer intro with extra keyboards on top of it. I would prefer to have more keyboards and less guitar. When the band comes in, it doesn't really, for me, give it much extra. I think it sounds a bit more dated when the guitars and drums comes in. I'd be happy just having the strings behind him, and obviously there's a sax solo.
I was about to ask
again and again.
Like, it's a big sax solo as well.
Yeah, I think that I'm a fan of this, but I would say that their best ballad or slow song for me is By My Side. But is that because I've not heard it a billion times and not heard loads of people cover it? Maybe, I don't know. But Babs, I think you were going to discuss a cover version you like.
Such a nice segue, Fran. Which I shared. So the first time I heard this song, it was not the original INXS version. It was the Tom Jones, Natalie Imbruglia version from Reload. Once again, this album keeps coming up this season. Controversially, I prefer it. I think this is an overrated INXS song, and not just because it's overplayed, because it took me actually blimmin' ages to hear it, but like the two of you, I really don't like the strings because it's kind of synth strings, and on the Tom Jones version there are real strings and they sound so much better. And Fran, you mentioned Bond, and I've written in the Tom Jones version the strings make it really sound Bond-like. I think in the Tom Jones version his voice is a bit much, right? Because you have to have a level of restraint. He's getting it all.
Well, how does it work with Natalie? How do they show in the vocal?
They take different sections, and then when it comes to the chorus they harmonize, and when they harmonize it works really well, and her voice works quite well, even though obviously it's not as good as Michael Hutchence's. I obviously the don't know why, that's impressive, but I find that it's a bit fake in pulling at your heartstrings, maybe because of how kind of epic his vocals sound, but matched with the very tinny almost
Yeah.
strings. So yeah, for me, overrated song.
It was played at a funeral as well, sadly. There you go.
Thanks.
No, they played the Tom Jones one at the funeral. Sorry,
the Tom Jones. Oh, that's fine. Natalie Imbruglia was there as well. Okay, good.
So moving on to your next pick, Bill.
Suicide Blonde. I feel like my picks are quite obvious, really. But yeah, I love
okay.
I love the harmonica on this. It's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like someone's got a big sort of sheet of white paper and just scribbled all over it, almost as a harmonica. It's the oral equivalent. It's just really addictive, isn't it? And fizzy. The vocals really irresistible. Like you said, there is obviously, it's mirroring a lot of the kick stuff. It's trying to recreate that.
I would say this is probably the most kick song on the album.
Yeah, but I like the harmonica. The harmonica adds something fun to it. I don't mind harmonicas, actually. It's, you know.
Yeah, I put that as well. I put, it's rare to hear a harmonica on a hit single back in 1990.
Yeah. And then I started to doubt myself. Is it a harmonica? Yeah, it is.
And it's sampled though. It's not playing it.
Well, do you know? Just to come in, I didn't realize it was a harmonica just because it's so the da. I wrote, "Is this a synth kazoo?"
Well,
my favorite instrument.
Like that's what it because it is so kind of.
Yeah, it is.
Back and forth. I was like, that doesn't sound
Zigzaggy.
natural, but like quite frighteningly, I didn't think it was a harmonica. So I think I need to go back and do some music.
There's a harmonica solo in the middle as well.
Yeah, I wrote synth. I literally wrote synth kazoo question mark.
It seems to be more about a character, doesn't it, rather than himself or anything.
Well, I think he wrote it about Kylie.
Okay, I didn't know that.
There we go.
That makes sense because they were a couple at the time, weren't they? That does make sense.
Yeah, but I think it was literally inspired by a conversation they had where she said, "I'm going to dye my hair blonde," and it was something like, "I'm going to dye it by my own hand," dye DYE, something like that. Fran, maybe you know better, but
yep, and there's the pun of the Suicide Blonde.
Oh, I like it more now. That's a good story. I like Kylie,
I remember this more than, as a kid, I remember this more than like Never Tears Us Apart because the video was constantly on repeat. Yeah. And me and my friends would do our own mock-up of the video. And there's people like sassying up to the camera and turning. You can't see it, unfortunately, because it's a podcast.
What a shame. That was I loved your sassy shimmy.
I can reenact it for you, but basically, it's just like models and the band walking up to the camera and like turning their heads and walking away again constantly. But I think I would say this is the perfect song to follow Kick with because it is kind of kick-ish and that sort of like funky guitar thing again. And then maybe the rest of Kick after all went in a different direction. But yeah, I said, it's rare to have a harmonica with a hit single in 1990. I love the layers of guitar. It's catchy as fuck chorus. And also, this is the last song that he ever performed.
Yeah. So synth kazoo aside,
Yes.
My notes are that I hadn't realised how much this sounded like U2. I mean, this almost sounds like the guitar sound from Desire or something like that. And yeah, although harmonica / synth kazoo and country guitars are not my usual bag, it works here. I don't know why, maybe because of the catchiness of the rhythm guitar hooks and the accompanying bass. I think also it's really a proper showcase of Michael Hutchence' vocals because he switches between like speak singing but then falsetto but then screaming. I mean, and even there's a really nice echo effect on his voice in parts. And I wrote that the brass is subtle once again for me. Yeah, normally when INXS use brass, they use it well. So yeah, I think this is definitely a good INXS song.
So Bill, what's your next pick?
Beautiful Girl.
Mm-hmm.
From the album you were talking about before, that it's their Ah Chung Baby. Yeah.
Yes.
I suppose this is my least favorite. Actually, I do actually like how restrained it is compared to the others in terms of it's not got as much bombast. Although I do like the bombast at times. I like the sort of twinkling percussion as well. And it's funny because you said it. The last one could sound like a U2 track. I think this one could as well, in a way. Maybe more of a B-side or something like The Sweetest Thing or something like that. But maybe a little bit saccharine, but kind of tender as well. So yeah, it depends which side you fall on, really. But I quite like it because it's quite different for them, different to the others as well.
I think this is definitely for me. It was a grower.
Yeah.
I mean, when you hear the best of, like, there's so many catchy songs on it. It's just hard to jump out. So I think it took me a while to get into it. But yeah, I guess it's more Velvet Underground for me, maybe sort of sound.
Yeah.
As someone was, Yeah, this is solely written by Andrew about his new baby girl. But I kind of like the stripped back arpeggios and piano and acoustic guitars, and sort of all blends along nicely. And then it gently builds up the keyboards and the saxophone at the end. So yeah, this is my favorite album by INXS because it's one of those albums where every single song sounds completely different, which is why you've got this on the album, because you've got like a bombastic song, Baby Don't Cry, with like a 60-piece orchestra, and then you got this stripped back, beautiful 60s sort of thing going on, and then you've got like songs like Taste It. So that's what I kind of like an album that takes you on a journey. So, Babs, Beautiful Girl.
So for me, this does fall on the overrated because I think it possibly was on a greatest hits, or
Yeah.
I definitely came to it very early. I don't hate it. I think Michael Hutchence sounding sultry and sexy as ever. Again, harmony. I love the harmonies. I think the brass is used well. I like the piano line that comes through, but not the keyboards that are backing it. So I could do away with those, but it is corny. I agree with you there, Bill. And yeah,
It's about his daughter.
I know, but this is the thing. I was going to say, I was like, yeah, this is a little bit and then when I read that he said, oh, I was writing lyrics like Baby Don't Cry and Beautiful Girl, just about how wonderful it is to have something else in your life besides yourselves to worry about and think about. And I was like, that is annoyingly quite sweet. And now I can't. But yeah, Bill, Fran is a self-described sap, and I have a colder heart in general when it comes to music. I think if many other bands had done this, I think I would really dislike it. But there is a restraint and a subtlety in there that I admire for sure.
Yeah, it's not cheesy, is it? But it could be a little bit saccharine. But depends what you read it was about. I didn't even know the meaning behind it. So
yeah, I didn't know also until today it was about his daughter. I always thought like, yeah, this is a bit cheesy, but then I was like and the way he talked about it as sort of like something else in your life to look after.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's I love men getting emotional. So yeah,
and I guess he's probably a bit bored of Michael writing songs about shagging, so it's better him to have something a bit different, maybe.
Fran with the shagging and death updates.
Have you heard the album? Are you a fan of Taste It, Babs? That's on the album.
I am a fan of Taste It, but I'm not a fan of Baby Don't Cry.
Yeah, I know that's a bit over the
Yeah,
top. But I guess if you've got the money, then you might as well try it recording with a big band.
Listen, I would want to go full out ELP or Michael INXS with a 60-piece orchestra one day for sure.
It definitely is like the album. Like, it's got a song with like a sitar in it. It's got it literally is the band going, right, we've got a lot of money. Let's just see what we can do in the studio.
That's it. When you said Baby Don't Cry was on it, I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't listen to it. But then you said Taste It, and I was like, that is completely different. So, yeah.
I love Taste It, and I love Heaven Sent. So we asked a question then. So, Bill, after you've been checking out INXS, would you declare them as overrated?
They're at the best. They're not overrated, and especially live. I think live band, they were sort of magnetic, weren't they? And I'd say maybe later on, maybe a little bit overrated, personally, in my opinion. But at their peak, not overrated.
They had it going on in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they sold 70 million albums. That's quite bad.
Yeah.
I guess they were one of the biggest bands in the world around 1988. But yeah, so for me, I would say not overrated, because I think in the UK, they are kind of like boiled down to like 2 or 3 songs. And like I said, barely anyone knows they even existed before Kick.
Yeah.
This is kind of, for me, a bit sad. And like,
you could argue they're underrated in a way, couldn't you? I suppose. If you wanted
up against
to.
you two.
That's the joy of this podcast.
The joy of the podcast.
Yeah.
So, for me, I would say they're not overrated, because I think there's a lot more to offer. I think that there's some bands that you only need to know about those 5 songs. I think with INXS, I think their band they've got 3 or 4 really good albums.
Yeah.
And Mike Hutchence was one of the best frontmen of all time. They wrote some great songs.
I suppose it's the only sort of like criticism some people might make, and like who are more into sort of the indie world, they might say, well, they're just like really over the top, and sort of, I don't know, like sort of that big sort of radio, going obviously for that big hit all the time, but they're when they're commercial peak. But I haven't got a problem with that. I suppose my only problem is sometimes with sort of bluesy rock bands like Rolling Stones, more of an example, sort of like when it's the same chord they're hammering away on, it feels like. But I feel like maybe INXS sort of like developed their own thing where they were stretching out sort of elements of funk and his personality, Michael Hutchence, and the rest of them.
So for me, Yeah, I think that more people need to check out INXS. But Babs, where do you sit?
As ever, I always begin with the Spotify monthly listeners.
Ta-da.
Did you look or?
I looked for go-betweens because I can't find out how many albums are sold.
Not many.
But yeah, so guess how many monthly listeners INXS have, just for fun.
2 million.
2 million from Bill. Fran, higher, lower?
Randomly, I know that Bombay Basketball Club have 2 million, so surely INXS is bigger than them. So I'm gonna say 10 million.
Because... Oh, Fran, you hit it. You hit it on the head.
Ding,
10
ding.
million. Amazing. Yeah, that surprised me. I would have guessed maybe between 2 and 4 million, like you, Bill. And normally my attitude to that is, well, because I didn't like every song on the playlist, but I don't hate any song on the playlist. And I think any band that makes one of my top 100 songs of all time could never be overrated. So for INXS, absolutely not overrated, especially because how could I call them overrated when I barely know their back catalogue? And Fran sent me one of their songs in advance that I didn't warm to immediately, but it was definitely like, oh, this is a completely different sound that might take some time to warm up to, and I'm very intrigued. So yeah, R.I.P. Michael Hutchence.
That's the end of part 1.
Do you listen to albums start to finish? Do you love concept albums? Are you always the first one at a party to bring up King Gizzard? Say no more. The Album Concept Hour podcast has everything you need. We have hot takes.
It's like Voltron.
It's just like Voltron. It's like Voltron with jazz. This is emo. This is Willie Nelson's emo trip. Bad improv attempts.
That was.
Let's all do our best Aussie accent.
Let's not.
Let's alienate all the Australians. And sometimes we even learn something. As they listened again and again to the song in the control room, Axel started saying, "Where do we go? Where do we go now? Where do we go?"
Shut up.
Spencer turned down the music and said, "Why don't you just try singing that?" And thus the last part of the song was born. Listen to the Album Concept Hour wherever you listen to podcasts.
Underrated.
Okay, so the go-between. So can you guide us through this, Bill, with your knowledge?
I'll try my best. It's funny because I probably didn't know of the go-betweens till about probably the early 2000s, really, because they did come back. But then I kind of delved into their, especially in the last 10 years, I've delved into their back catalogue a lot. And I suppose for the uninitiated, they're sort of Robert Foster and Grant McClellan, who were a pair of teenagers who met in Brisbane. And they were influenced by the likes of Dylan, Velvet Underground, Talking Heads, stuff like that. And their earlier stuff is much more, and in a way, I kind of wish I'd put maybe a slightly more punkier track on here, but I suppose I just couldn't leave off certain ones. But yeah, they kind of were influenced by the British invasion, new wave. After a period of trying to find a drummer, they found a lady called Lindy Morrison, and the band's classic lineup was settled, and then they moved to England and recorded their debut LP. Again, heavily influenced by post-punk, new wave. It's called Send Me a Lullaby, and they were signed to Rough Trade very briefly. And McKellen's relationship with multi-instrumentalist Amanda Brown, who joined the band later on, and Foster's relationship with Lindy meant that often they were described as the indie Fleetwood Mac, because there was often that kind of push and pull between those two relationships. And I suppose there's a sort of an almost a Beatles kind of comparison as well, because they were quite different songwriters. Robert Foster, or Forster, is more of an angular, sort of wordy, lanky. His lyrics are sort of more impenetrable and arty, whereas Grant McClellan is sort of the more warm, melodic, heartfelt, maybe Paul McCartney type really. But I suppose their first albums maybe sounded like two different songwriters. Their first few albums sort of shut together, really. But as they reached around the time they reached Spring Hill Fair and released one of the tracks that we're going to play, Bachelor Kisses, they sort of stumbled on a formula, really. And then the next run of releases was excellent, including Tallulah, which is kind of really, really sort of hits that big sound. There's almost comparable to somebody like the Echo and the Bunnymen with the orchestral stings. Yeah, it's got the post-punk new wave sound as well, but also the pop, leaning into the pop, and they were kind of going in that direction when they finally sort of reached their pinnacle on 16 Lovers Lane, which is their classic album, really. And I'm trying to find a copy of it, and this is how cult of a band they are. It's like, it's 50 quid for a copy, because there's not many copies around, and they've never reissued it. So, but it is one of those albums that's kind of become a cult classic in years as the years have gone on. They never had a top 40 hit. They got back together in the 2000s, did like sort of 3 albums of really, sort of maybe more straightforward sort of alternative rock, just the 2 of them with new members. And they released, probably the standout was Oceans Apart, which has an excellent single called Finding You, which is probably their last great song, I'd say. But yeah, I just think they fit this moniker so well, of underrated band, because they never had a top 40 hit, and they had amazing songs, and they wrote a bit about why they were never, sort of big. They never made it big as they should have done. McKellen said, we had this interesting thing going on in terms of being a rock band or a pop band and having a different background, an art background. We like bands like the Monkees, we like Dylan, we like Television and Talking Heads, people that normally weren't in rock and roll, but being in rock and roll at the same time and seeing where that would go. So I like that kind of idea that, and also they didn't really have like a sort of strong image either, because they were quite different. And also, as you could probably hear from like some of the songs, it's like it almost sounds like a different band at times, because the difference between McKellen and Robert Forster as frontmen and vocalists is just like, Lennon McCartney almost, almost like having David Byrne in the band and McCartney in the band, almost. So it's the one album where they did make it seamless almost is 16 Lovers Lane, which is like a love letter to pop almost, and a love letter to, failed relationships and successful ones as well. But they like, I've been sort of gorging on the go-betweens, and in a way I've kind of like, I suppose you would kind of compare them to bands like REM in the 80s, or the Smiths, because they moved over here and they were trying to become successful or trying to get a wider audience, like all indie bands as they were trying to get a wider audience. But for me, like an album like Tallulah or 16 Lovers Lane is as good as any of those any of those bands really in that period, So that's why I thought they were ideal for this, because they're one of those bands you can sort of go in and sort of, like you were saying about INXS, you can go in and explore and find this like treasure trove of like songwriting and in different styles as well, in quite different styles. Probably not, I wish I'd, in a way, maybe it didn't, it's hard to, in 5 tracks, it's hard to show off all the different sides of a band, but I'll try my best.
And thank you for trying it. So I watched a documentary on 16 Lovers Lane, and they're speaking about each album was split down the middle, like half Forster and half McCallum. So for yourself, do you switch on whose songs you prefer?
I'm more of a Grant McCallum, because I am just, and that's probably why my tracks edge more towards him. But I did include one, two Layers of Lightning, which is more of a Robert Forster kind of arty, kind of, fractured track that I thought maybe gives more of an idea of, and it's an album track, and it gave me more of an idea of that side of the band than just the pure pop kind of big anthems kind of. But then they did start off as almost like a post. I listened to some of the earlier stuff, and some of the albums aren't, a bit like INXS in a way. Like there's a couple of like standout tracks, but like, I mean, the earliest one I got here is Cattle and Cane, and that, I just couldn't leave that off because it is so atmospheric. We'll get into it in a minute, but yeah, it's got that kind of new wavy time signature thing going on.
Yeah,
Yeah, I tend to lean more towards like melody myself. I'm probably more of a melody, although I do like some
I
things.
apologize already in advance.
I do like some things that are a bit more, obtuse. It depends what hits me on the day,
Robert Forster's kind of an interesting figure, don't he? I quite like him.
He is.
Watching him talk. He also like dressed up in like women's clothing from like the mid-80s and all sorts of things, and he's quite. I thought it's quite cool. He says, "Oh yeah, we're not made for the top 40," but I don't know. I think you guys are quite interesting.
Yeah,
he seems quite down on himself. The music's kind of like very up and sunshiny for once I've heard.
Yeah,
but he seems quite dour on the music. So he kept saying, people think that looking back that we had like hit singles. Believe me, we had no fucking hits.
No, they didn't sell many records, which it's just so surprising to me every time I listen to one of their albums. In a way, like the first 2 or 3, I can get it because like they're probably like 2 or 3. There's like 1 or 2 standout tracks in each one, and the rest of it is not quite at that level. But then once you get into that run of Tallulah, 16 Lovers Lane, Liberty Bell, and the Black Diamond, once you get into all of those, they're just cracking albums.
Mm. I think people definitely like say that they're a band for people who live in Australia because they feel Australian when listening to their music.
I saw that in YouTube comments as well. Yeah,
maybe it's harder for us as Brits and Portuguese. Maybe
I think they've got a very English sensibility as well, though. In a way, like a lot of the things they're influenced by, they were English, so that's why they moved over here, I think. But yeah, I suppose with go into it, but like The Streets of Your Town, that is considered one of the best Australian songs ever.
I knew one song, and that's because Nada Surf covered it, and that's Love Goes On, because Nada Surf had that on their covers album, but I literally didn't know anything else.
That's a good song as well. That could definitely be on this, yeah, for sure.
That's on 16 Lovers Lane, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this was like an introduction basically to the Go-Betweens, and that's why I wanted to see their film, because I love discovering bands watching a film.
Yeah.
Babs, did you know anything about the Go-Betweens before this, or?
So I thought I did, and then I was like, oh, I know absolutely nothing about this band. For some reason, I got conflated with the Runaways. I don't know why. That's where I went to, and I was even looking, I was like, do they have a song with Go in the title? But yeah, I have read the book that they're named after, The Go-Between, which starts with that very nice famous line, the past is a foreign country, they do things differently there. And because also, I didn't really know what the theme was when it was proposed. I was like, I presume it's Australia. I was like, I have absolutely no idea what on earth this is going to sound like. So yeah, I went into this completely blind, not knowing what I was going to listen to.
So with that in mind, Bill, introduce us to your first track.
This is Cattle and Cane. Yeah, I suppose it's like the signature, even though they released a few singles off the first album that were more like ramshackle, sort of post-punky, as I mentioned. I was going to pick one, but then I just thought, I can't leave this off. It's just, there's something so atmospheric about it, and sort of it captures that time and place. It's an autobiographical reminiscence by Grant McClellan, who wrote the song with Robert Foster on a train trip home to North Queensland as a schoolboy. The song was written and recorded by a homesick McClellan in London, and there's just like a wistfulness to it. There's a real sort of, and then it's got that like time signature, which is really unusual, I think. That's married up with the new wave sensibility, and yet the vocals are almost like you can't get a handle on them. Almost they're kind of like almost like a wisp, but there's kind of this. I love the way it captures that landscape of Australia. The detail, that's something about Go-Betweens. They use some unusual imagery that you just wouldn't think of. They're talking about cattle, cane, tin, timber, fire. It captures that homesickness, I suppose, and it's that idea of being away from home.
I mean, it's not the greatest title, is it, really? If you see Cattle and Cane, you don't really think, oh, yeah, I need to check out that one. But for me, yeah, first time I heard it, and I instantly thought of like that Scottish indie sound from the 80s. I'm a fan of that sort of movement. A bit C86.
They were influenced on Bell and Sebastian, which you can probably tell.
Yes. Yeah, I put that one. But yeah, it's kind of weird. It's a bit gloomy, but it's also delicate at the same time. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Definitely.
And I've thought it sort of glides along with no real chorus. No. I mean, they repeat the same phrases, but it's not a real instant chorus. But it really works. And like, reading the comments, people saying, "Oh yeah, this makes you think of Australia instantly." And I was trying to think, what song makes me think of England? And I thought, "World in Motion" by New Order.
Vindaloo,
can't think of it.
Vindaloo.
Vindaloo, exactly. Is that a song? Park Life? I mean, that sounds pretty lame, doesn't it? I mean, I don't
Park
know.
Life,
Common People.
yeah.
Oh but that's slagging off
I know,
rich people.
I know.
I don't know. So I couldn't do that. But I thought the solo stands out, and they do a lot of that. But the solo doesn't really suit the song.
Yeah.
It's almost like a new order solo.
Yeah.
When it comes in, which I thought was really interesting after that sort of delicate acoustic guitar. Suddenly it's like burn the sun, the guitar.
Yeah, there is
solo
something
suddenly.
slightly jarring about it, but yet it somehow works. I suppose that's like what you would say about most like indie songs, wouldn't you? I guess.
Yeah, and it is to me so indie because he doesn't have that perfect singing voice.
No.
It does feel a little bit homemade, a little bit, like hobby. But so yeah, I guess these days indie can be as shiny as anything, can't it? But back in those days, indie did mean slightly punk, slightly homemade, slightly do it yourself. And I kind of like his non-perfect vocal, if that makes sense. It's a bit like Jeffrey Lewis. I don't know if you know Jeffrey Lewis. Yeah. It's got that sort of twang to his vocals. So kind of like.
And then there's like this sort of spoken word bit at the end. That's Forster.
But do they collaborate a lot on? Because
all of it's collaboration, really. I think.
Because I read that McKellen did like the poppy songs, and then Forster's left to do like the art rock songs.
Well, no, I think a lot of it's collaboration. You know.
Okay.
But yeah, there's definitely a divide. Obviously, like I was reading some of it, and Robert Forster was saying, I didn't even know that he'd come up with Streets of Your Town,
So Babs, what are your thoughts on Cattle and Cane?
So, yeah, I was trying to find, I was like, who does this remind me of? And you guys talking about Scottish Indian C86, I was like, yes, music that I don't know very much about, because I was really, I was like, it sounds like The Chameleons, but less synthy. And I recommend Down the Up Escalator, by the way, as a place to start with The Chameleons. So yeah, I was like, is this The Chameleons but less synthy? I also compared it to two French bands. For me, Louise Attack, the acoustic guitar sound, it reminded me of, and they're very inspired by Violent Femmes as well. And then even towards the end, it reminded me a bit of Indochine, not the piano Indochine, but more the guitar Indochine. But I wrote, like you, the New Order, the bass at the end is pure hooky. And yeah, so on the song itself, I was like, well, this is quite an intriguing beginning. The guitar and bass are kind of hesitating with each other. I was like, this is both post-punk and new wave, which is interesting. And like you, Bill, I love the time signature and the rhythm it creates, like swaying. It kind of doesn't surprise me that he wrote it on a train. Yeah, it has that vibe. And I really like Grant's gentle voice. And you mentioned that it's a band that needs repeated listens, and I totally agree and wonder if that's why they are not as big as they are, because none of the songs on this playlist immediately call to me at all, including this one. I was like, okay, I can admire all these things, but I'm not loving the song, and it was only on the second listen I was like, oh, I'm appreciating this a little bit more. And I wanted to as we do sometimes, call out a YouTube comment which said, this song has become even more poignant for me as I get older, with my dad suffering dementia in his old age. Time waits for no one, innocence lost, then fake memories come back, but never quite sure whether they are real. Poetry in the YouTube comment section again. So yeah, I was like, okay, this is clearly a band with lots of influences. And I then read, when I went to look them up, that they kind of had that as a purpose from the beginning. I think that they said, like, well, I'll quote it because they said it better than I do, NPR. The go-betweens made music that hit people's pop pleasure receptors in an almost sneaky, definitely brainy sort of way. This approach grew organically out of the art school pals' early post-punk leaning years, as well as the love of big sticky hooks. I was like, all right, they're trying to do a bit of both here.
Yeah, they're probably not like pop enough to be like FM radio.
It's very subtle.
I suppose the point is they probably deserve to sell a few more records. That's all it was. I guess that's why I say they're
the fact that they haven't reissued an album, that's crazy when clearly the demand is there.
Definitely is, yeah.
Over underrated.
So should we move on to your next pick then, Bill?
Yeah, Bachelor Kisses. It's so ripe with sort of longing and sort of delectable arrangements, and there's a sort of backing vocal on there from Anna De Silva, who's from the Raincoats. I love that sort of sighing backing vocals. Okay. Yeah, also Tracy Thorn was also one of their backing vocalists at one point as well, apparently. But yeah, there's a sort of push and pull to it, and there's a sort of world weariness. It's about promises being broken and how men sort of let down women, basically. I didn't realize that until I read more into the song. I actually picked it for a podcast we did on 1984 as an underrated song, and I just thought it was like a romantic song. And then when more I read about it, I love the sort of line, "Don't believe what you've heard. Faithful's not a bad word," you know? I love that. And he said, it's not a courtly song. This is McClellan now talking. I see a lot of infidelity around me. Most people involved in music are guilty in many cases. I see a lot of trust and promises being broken. I'm guilty of it myself. It's all about promises the world of men have made to women as far as the future of their life goes, security, the raising of children. And I just found it wanting, really. It's not a unique thought. I suppose it does kind of, hint at what they would go on to do, or he would go on to do specifically, I guess. And that is the side of the band that I do. That chimes with me as much more, in a way, I would say.
So, yeah, I read that they thought this was going to be their big pop single.
Yeah.
And then obviously it got nowhere. I mean, yeah, I put, it's about infidelity. I put, it's almost sleepy and beautiful. It's not for the perfect-minded. It's like the chorus again is also a little bit too subtle again. I think the song is songs sort of like breeze along, but maybe if you're trying to have a hit, people maybe want that. I don't know. Did they ever do like some killer choruses? Because obviously on this, most of the songs are very melodic, but not like there's no stock ache and Wharton.
No, of course not. Yeah, and you have to remember in this period, I suppose being an indie band was quite a like, you wore it on your sleeve, didn't you? There were a lot of synth pop bands around in this period. This was sort of prime 1984, 1985, 1986.
They mentioned that. They said, no, we refuse to have any drum machines or synths. Yeah. I mean, I guess looking back, that wasn't the best thing to do. Maybe they sort of experimented.
Yeah, maybe they were just happy with being that, though. I suppose there's a lot of bands who were just happy being bands in a way. Obviously they would have obviously moving to London and signing to certain these record labels, they would have liked to have sold more records. Of course they would. But I don't think they were like, I suppose in a way, the fact that they didn't have hits was the reason they split up in a way.
Yeah, it's weird though, because didn't it break up after the biggest album?
Yeah, and I think it was to do with some of the relationships kind of falling apart as well. And there's more to that as well, I think.
The John Peel version, I think, is better than the album version. I don't know if you've heard it. It's on YouTube. But it's a lot clearer and it's vocally and the guitars sound far better on the Peel version. But it might a little bit of Lloyd Cole in the Commotions. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Lloyd Cole in the Commotions. I thought this is this is a decent track, and I've probably listened to it maybe 6 times today. Babs, Bachelor's Kiss.
Well, let's first shout out to Ana da Silva, because she's of Portuguese origin, and she's not even of Portuguese origin, she's Portuguese. Oh, yeah. And so there are very few, there's Saffron from Republica and JK, the other from Jamiroquai, the other two of Portuguese origin people in the British rock world, so shout out to her. So I'll tell you what I did like. I love his soft voice when it comes in. I quite like the lightning effects after about the middle, and I don't get, even though it's repetitive, I don't get sick of the won't you save every time. I'm like, it tides me over again. I think it's the time signature thing that was also in Catalan Kane. But when it started, I was like, is this Lady in Red by Chris de Burgh? That's the vibe that it gave. So immediately I was like,
if only.
Then, I think probably after this song, I read that NPR quote and I was like, yeah, I think I like their post-punk edges more than their pop edges. And apart from the time signature changes and stuff like that, I didn't really get that from this song. So yeah, I wasn't such a fan of this one.
Oh, I get it. It's very romantic,
Cold Dead Heart. Yes.
It's funny though, because it's kind of a, like you said, that you think it's really romantic, but actually it's kind of a warning in a way.
It's like that meme that keeps coming up, and I think we've mentioned it on the podcast, where it's like the tune, the lyrics, and it'll be like, the house that's really brightly coloured and then the black house. There's a lot of bands that's their whole vibe, they'll write the most horrendous rendering lyrics, but it's very jingly jangly on the top.
Yeah, there's a street to your town as well. Like talks about domestic violence. Just drop that in there, just drop a bit of domestic violence into this jaunty sort of, jangly song.
So what's your next pick, Bill?
It's called Bye Bye Pride, and it's from their album Tallulah, I believe. It's just really sort of joyously big and sort of cinematic almost, and it just boats the really big melody again, and there's sort of soaring and there's a really great oboe on it as well from Amanda Brown, who was McClellan's partner at the time. It's just really, I suppose I read somewhere that it's like as close to epic as they ever got, and forced to put it's Grant's majestic Bye Bye Pride was one of the best opening lives ever, and it's like a 10-foot wave driven by Lindy's snare and Amanda's piping oboe on the top. Yeah, there's something jaunty about it. Yeah, it's kind of like about failed romance again. It's kind of that duality of a lot of indie pops like that. It's kind of that duality of a really happy song or sound tune with a sort of a darker, but I suppose I was struggling to narrow it down to 5, so I was just like, what really grabs me, and this one grabbed me. So I was just like the way it sort of bursts forth in a way, like it's almost like it comes out of the door, and it's just like straight into it. Steve Kilby from The Church said he selected this as one of his best Australian songs. He said this song is full of longing and regret and naive lyrics. The lyrics are so Brisbane. I can almost see it all happening right in front of me. I could never grow sick of this song, he said. So,
and we should mention that Brisbane have now named a bridge after the band.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, actually.
So they had no hits, but they got a bridge. So,
McClellan died in 2006 of a heart attack, which is really sad. Because they got back together in 2000, did a few albums, and then 2010 they had a toll bridge, and then Native Brisbane renamed the Go Between Bridge after them. Yeah, so
I mean, that's a nice title for a bridge as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Bye Bye Pride. I thought this is going to be like an angry song, or like it's just like Bye Bye Pride. Again, it's another lovely, it's a beautiful narrative story. He loves to sing about his environment. I do enjoy Amanda's presence. I enjoy her in the band. I enjoyed really like the oboe and the backing vocals she provides for the band. And I was going to say that this reminds me a lot of the Dream Academy. It's not many people know Dream Academy apart from Life in the Northern Town, but they had a lot of like acoustic tracks of like an oboe player and a flute player, and I thought, this is very much the same sort of vibe. This was my 3rd favorite track, but again, I think maybe it is missing that spark, which is why it probably didn't become a hit single. But it is weird why this isn't played at all, because this to me could easily be played on on radio. I don't see it's
you
not,
never
it's not
hear
exactly,
the Go Betweens.
challenging.
I suppose that's why I picked them in a way. You never hear them.
Although I reading some YouTube comments, people were saying they are played on Six Music these days. Because people say,
again,
I heard it on Six Music, so at least they're getting some play. Babs.
So this was my least favorite song on the playlist. I was like, wow, I disagree with almost everything.
You're not an oboe fan.
I am an oboe fan,
Okay.
but not in this song. I don't like the harmonies, and the end of the door is always wide open. Sorry, the door is always open wide. Really irritated me. I was like, it's too merry, it's too happy, and it's one of those where as soon as it started, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like this. And sometimes I can be wrong, right? Sometimes I was like, come on, Barbara, open your mind. The one thing that I did write that was maybe positive is this seems to me like a forerunner for a certain type of Britpop acoustic guitar. I was like, I've heard this in so many kind of mid to late 90s British bands. So I was wondering, who did they influence?
Bell and Sebastian is a big one, I guess. Yeah.
I was thinking maybe the Charlatans or something like that. I don't know. Like
possibly.
Yeah.
I've never heard them associated with Britpop, but yeah.
So, but that's my least favourite, so at least we've got that over and done.
I probably wouldn't have liked this kind of thing like 20 years ago,
Okay.
So
Interesting.
It's funny.
Have you mellowed, Bill?
Possibly. I always loved melody, but I also like noise as well when I was younger. So I suppose my tastes have like And I suppose I've been looking for like a replacement for the Smiths. So
Yeah, I wonder
these
why.
guys and the Railway Children, another underrated band. That yeah,
I don't think I've ever even heard of the Railway Children. But now that we've mentioned it, it's going on the playlist for the podcast. So there we go.
So, Bill, what's your next pick, please?
This is Twin Layers of Lightning. Yeah, I suppose I picked this because it's just such a more of a Robert Forster kind of piece of songwriting. Really, it wasn't a single; it's just an album track that people pick out, and there's something really fractured about it, and kind of like subtle and like it's very different, obviously, to everything else on the playlist. And yeah, just like that. I love the way the sort of guitars sort of balance and the kind of sort of an elegance to it that's kind of broken open, but it's got these kind of like wry, foreboding vocals that are kind of almost Lou Reed, Dylan-y, sort of dripping in irony. And I love that line about Bouncer's got no brain, said both of you are barred. I had to tell him, listen straight, listen Jack, don't you know I'm a star, like that. You know what I mean? Which is really ironic considering, you know, they weren't really big act, you know. Well, I assume he's talking about himself anyway, but yeah, I like the sort of delivery is quite detached as well, and it's just very different. Obviously, I just wanted to show something totally different to everything else I picked, really. But you'd almost listen to this and think this is a different band, really, you know.
This is the song that I struggled more with, to be fair.
Fair enough.
Although I do like, I really like. Is it called? Is it Head Full of Steam?
Yeah, that's a good one as well.
Yeah. That's my favorite track I saw.
I suppose I wanted to pick one off each sort of
Yeah.
album kind of thing as well. So yeah,
Someone put on YouTube, "This is a grower. It gets better over time." 33 years later, it's now my favorite song. I thought, I'm sorry, Jules Brown, but I don't have that long to listen to that.
it is very. It's probably not even my like usual kind of thing, but I suppose I thought this is so different to everything else. So you know, it's going on.
It's got like it's got a melodic guitar line, but I can't actually whistle it. Does that make sense?
Totally.
It's kind of like jangly, but it's not really.
It's like little fragments, isn't it? Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely interesting. I said it left me with an air of mystery. I enjoyed Robert. The lyrics were interesting. I guess he's taking a piss by, you know, obviously they weren't stars at all.
No,
and
I just like that irony.
Is it about him or is it just about?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's about him. It just sounds like him. But I saw it cited as like, you know, by people who know the Go-Betweens even more than me, like as one of the sort of like their lesser known sort of gems. Like,
No, it's good to have a rainbow of different sounds. I mean, but yeah, they put on that they thought this album was going to be the big hit, and again, they reckon they shot themselves in the foot by refusing drum machines and synths because they think they had loads of like pop songs that could have.
It's funny because I listened to that album, I don't think that at all. So
really,
I don't hear many like huge hits in comparison to some of the others.
Babs.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bill, you were saying you wanted to provide different kinds of sounds, and this is a sound that I preferred. I thought the beginning was really captivating, and I love the bass line. But what I thought was interesting is, so I really liked this song when it was minimal, right?
Yeah.
And so far, I really liked Glenn's voice, but here, when the voice, piano, and guitar come in, I'm like, it's too much. It's way too much. I feel like it's just thrown in randomly and thrown out. And I gave it like a good guy. I listened to this 3 or 4 times, but every time that came in, I was like, no. That's what I felt with this song. But I love that angular sound.
This is Robert Forster, you see, and I suppose that's why one of the reasons they never broke through is that it's like, you know, you've got 2 people who are sort of like, so you've almost got like 2 different bands, you know, because people want to like, especially in the 80s, probably, you know, definitely, they like grab onto that one frontman, don't they? It's like, oh, this is the frontman, you know.
Babs, visually, they're so different. Like,
so different.
Robert's like a Gandhi guy who sometimes wears lipstick and has like weird white hair and all sorts of things. And then Grant looks like the most average person of all time. Do you know what I mean?
It's just
so
the
it's
dude.
like AC/DC, is it?
So I guess it would be confusing if you saw one video and saw another video. Thought, what the fuck? Is that the same band? So,
I think I watched the Cattle and Cane video, but I have to say, I was kind of rushing a bit to finish the preparation, and it didn't really grab me. So I was like, I just don't think I'm going to bother. Like, I don't think, you know, you mentioned how the INXS video made the song, absolutely, but the the 1.5 that I saw for Go Betweens, I was like, yeah, I don't think it's adding anything.
No, they weren't really a video band. No, not at all.
But I wonder if they had been, would they have had more success? Maybe.
Possibly.
Because they are a storytelling band, right? And there are stories that you could. So I feel like it is a bit of a wasted opportunity because I maybe didn't save Cattle and Cane, but I can't deny that it paints a whole picture. And the fact, especially like it's in 3 sections telling the 3 eras of life. I think that there's more that could have been done there.
But I think a lot of Australians did videos early on because of the distance, because they had to send things to Europe and America. So
I think
that's why.
I've read a book tried to start a reading book by Luke Haynes, who's in the auteurs. He mentioned the go-betweens are around a lot, and he always felt it was sad that they never, made it a bit big, or just weren't more known.
So to the final pick, and I guess apparently one of the biggest.
No, it's their most known song, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Streets of Your Town. I just could not pick this just because it's just there's just something about it. Anyway, there's a good quote from Amanda Brown, who's obviously Grant's partner at the time. She said it's a widely misunderstood song in the same vein as something like Born in the USA. People think it's a kind of patriotic sentiment. It's actually very dark, and the lyrics about butchers, knives, and battered wives. There's a lot more awareness of domestic violence now, so it's a very relevant song. Yeah, despite being their most glossy song and their biggest tune, it wasn't a hit. Still in number 70, even in the Australian charts, and only 80 in the UK. And the band broke up in acrimony in 1989, not long after, the year after their best album, 16 Lovers Lane. So but it just, I suppose it's something, like I was saying before, the kind of revealing of when you first hear this, you're like, yeah, that's a nice tune. And then like the more you listen to it and the more you sort of examine the details and they're talking about the buildings being pulled down. There's kind of there's domestic violence in there. There's just sudden jolts of a bit like the Smiths where they'll just hit you with like this, but in a different way to the Smiths, because Morrissey's so like, he's so flamboyant, or the way he delivers it is so different. Whereas with Grant McCallum, he's just delivering it like the same he was delivering a sort of tender sentiment,
Definitely, yeah. I think with Smith, you're listening out for that, aren't you?
Yeah.
Sort of
Whereas this is like, the town is full of battered wives and stuff like that. These lines are just real key. But yeah, the tune as well. A lot of people love this song. It's been voted one of the best Australian songs. In retrospect. So they've kind of like had another life with this song and the album as well. As I said before. But yeah. It's just a beautiful song, and it's got that kind of very Australian, vivid. Again, the song's bridge, "Shut It Down," they pulled it down, is a sentiment that Brisbane people of that generation would really feel, because a lot of their beloved buildings were torn down in the dead of night, and so I suppose it's got that kind of darker underbelly as a song than you actually would ever. If you just hear it, then you would ever realize, if that makes sense.
They said that a lot of his album was helped by John Wilstead, the new bassist, and also
it's a lot richer than anything else they ever did, and glossy.
He added more layers, definitely.
It's very shiny. It's very I'm trying to get a copy.
I was like, but it sounds like I think the band fucking hate him, but
they hate the production he did on it. He made their best album, so yeah.
He said that Lindy Morrison was crap at drumming. So yeah, there's like a documentary on that album. It's on YouTube, and he's quite. You can tell that he doesn't give a shit. He says, "I hated the go-betweens. I don't know why I joined the band."
Why would you do that to yourself?
He then says, I knew Lindy from being a punk band called Zero, but she hadn't got any better at drumming, and being a bassist with a shit drummer is not a happy place. So he said that he just enjoyed experimenting in the studio. But I was like, okay, you're quite brash. But this regarding the song, so it's I really love the verse, but I'm not a fan of the lyric round and round, up and down. It feels too nursery rhyme for me, and that grates on me a little bit. I love her backing up when she sings. She's saying "shine" is she in the background, Amanda. Yeah. So I like the melody, but yeah, that chorus, it kind of it's maybe a bit too sweet, a bit too nursery rhyme, and I find it hard to jump on board. And obviously, I'm a Crowded House fan, so I'm used to quite over melodic tracks. But yeah, they always seem to have that guitar side again. Sort of stands out. I've listened to the whole album, and this is a strong album. And yeah, there's other songs I would have
Yeah, I know what you mean. I could have done like Love Goes On. I later like that one.
yeah, it's a good track.
That is a good track. But I suppose I just picked this because you just can't. It's the same with Cattle and Cane. It's like, yeah, how can you do 5 songs without including this? It's just,
Yeah, definitely.
I know what you
definitely.
mean. I know what you mean. It is a bit. That's what I was trying to say. That there is like it's one of those ones. Again, it's like the more you listen to, and again, it's the album, really. It fits on the album just beautifully, So there you go. I think it's more the album that's actually the recommendation than just this song.
Do they have any more electric guitar going for it sort of tracks, or is it always a bit more
earlier on? The Tallulah album it's got that balance of like post-punk and more of these kind of melodic songs, yeah, for sure. Like there's one I nearly picked that like maybe more Echo and the Bunnymen, as I said, there's almost like an Echo and the Bunnymen feel to it. But then that was that era, wasn't it? There was a lot of bands who were like the Waterboys as well,
Yeah.
So that kind of like big sound with the strings. Yeah, you've got like that post-punk kind of influence still.
Babs?
Okay, well, so the guitar solo to me sounds exactly like the guitar on "What Do You Want From Me" by Monaco. Exactly the same.
And again, the New Order influence.
That's why I was the hooky bass was obvious, but really go back and listen to it, and then go and listen to "What Do You Want From Me."
Cool.
It sounds exactly the same. So this one, it started jangly, but it didn't put me off completely. And on repeated listenings, I really appreciated the lush atmosphere that's created by the song, like that. Yeah, that wore me down, let's say. And I quite like the harmonies, but like Fran, I had issues with the lyrics, but not the same ones. Maybe on reflection of the time, I really dislike the lyrics, "Watch the butcher shine his knives," and "This town is full of battered wives," because it hits you like a freight train. And I was like, it sounds a bit crass, to be honest. Like, it sounds like he's like, oh, I'm trying to evoke life in a small town. Oh, let's talk about the small business owner and the battered wives. But I think you made the point there, Bill, that this was 1988. And I think, maybe domestic violence wasn't... I was literally having this conversation yesterday because I did a module in my master's called the social psychology of health communication, and we talked about like trying to make domestic violence a public issue rather than a private one, because that's how it was seen. So yeah, I think I take your point there, that maybe it isn't as crass as I initially thought.
It's trying to say there's like this underbelly to the city that might seem all nice on the surface, but then it's like this sudden, and I think that's what's surprising about it. Yeah, because it's so shiny as a song. It's like this, and like you said, that nursery rhyme element to it. But then it's got these kind of, and I suppose that is, that's the essence of indie pop in a way. Is like those two competing, factors. Really, it's like that darkness set against that kind of more tunefulness. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was my second favorite after Cattle and Cane. So yeah, I think there's levels of jangle, and this passes the jangle test for me.
I think Back to the Kiss was my favorite on the playlist, but I really liked Finding You, which is 2005.
Yeah, that's the one I mentioned before. That's their last great song, I think. That's very direct. That's very direct in a way that a lot of this stuff isn't really. Anyway.
Was that a hit at all? Do you know what was it played on?
I think it was, like indie sort of level hit, but not like a hit, top 40 hit, It's just not that kind of band really. But like, sort of big, actually probably bigger in retrospect. I don't know. You can tell me with the Spotify numbers than they were at the time.
I do have them up. So what's the guess? After hearing that INXS have 10 million, what's your guess for Go Between?
I know, so I'm going to tap out.
Is this a month?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could just be one song. I think
I'll go 1 million, maybe.
148,000.
Oh, harsh.
Yeah.
Harsh.
So,
but actually interesting because not all of their albums are on there.
I mean, does that mean that their fans are more vinyl
or listening on YouTube or something? But even their like fan club has only got like 8,000, so they're not like a big band really. But they're more like they're one of those names to drop. Do you know what I mean? They're like You know, have you ever listened to the Go-Betweens? You know, it's like sort of this kind of, they're the cult band of cult bands, you know. That's why I picked them. Really, they're the perfect underappreciated band, really, you know. So there you go. That's why I picked them.
So I guess you should ask a question. So I would go to Babs first. And Babs, the Go-Betweens, underrated?
I would say, I'm very sorry, but no. With a heavy heart, especially when I hear that it's difficult to get a copy of the album, and yeah, like they have as few listeners as they do, but I'm like,
it didn't blow you away.
It didn't blow me away. But let's summarize it. I don't think they are underrated, but they are worth giving time to. That's for sure. So if you listen to one of this playlist and you don't get it immediately, I would say it is worth repeated listenings. Okay, on those repeated listenings, there's nothing. I think if there had been like maybe one song that really hooked me in, I wouldn't have said so. But yeah, I didn't want to save any of them. So I'm very sorry, Bill.
Okay,
but I think Fran might have.
I don't take it personally. It's cool. It's cool.
I'm glad.
So yeah, I would say underrated because I mean, I didn't know any of your songs, and I've been in their world the past 2 days watching interviews and documentaries. I think Robert Forster's a beautiful man. I think that Grant has written some beautiful songs. Yeah, they haven't got that magic maybe which they needed, but I think they got definitely enough to have at least a top 40 here at least, Or
when you consider what's been top 40, I mean, come on.
It's I'm surprised that more people haven't like included the songs in the like TV or films or anything.
I think they've been on a couple.
We've got a hand up here.
I wasn't listening to your playlist on Spotify, Bill. I was listening to it on Tidal, so I was kind of finding the songs. And Cattle and Cane on Tidal is on the soundtrack for this Italian film called Amanda that I've seen the trailer. It looks really good. I haven't seen it yet. But I got very confused because... So I pressed listen to it. It's the second to last song on the soundtrack. And then the next song is a song by Jarvis Cocker. And I was like, I'd forgotten that I hadn't put the song next. So it's Elvis Has Left the Building by Jarvis Cocker. And I was like, God, the singer is sounding really like Jarvis Cocker. And I was like, oh no, that is actual Jarvis Cocker. But I was like, if for a band like this to be on an Italian film where it's also kind of promoted as like with a new song by Jarvis Cocker, I was very I remember seeing the trailer for this and really being intrigued by it. But I think in some places, yes, there still are.
Bill, we touched on your website and your podcast.
Yeah.
Do you have anything specific you want to plug, or
just the website really, and just like the work that people do on it, and like you can check us out on we're on socials at God Is in the TV. And on Twitter, and we're on Facebook, God Is in the TV Zine. And this is the podcast as well. Give it a chance. We do so that's the format of it, but we also do like a one where we talk about a year in music as well and give our like favorite song, our clunker, and our underrated song. So that's quite fun as well. And we've done a few of those. So I'm trying to think what else I'm plugging at the moment. Actually, I'm doing PR for a band as well, but
Go for it. The
Goer Express, yes. You know them?
Yes.
Yeah. They're a kind of I don't know how you describe it. It's quite it's kind of Supergrass kind of meets the Lars or something. I don't know. Quite sort of indie band.
I saw them at a festival, and I think they're perfect to discover at a festival.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, they're good fun indie band. They're young guys. Actually, it's quite cool because like I did like a single for them like 4 years ago. It's another thing I do is PR like for the last probably like 15 years, and they've got a lot bigger since then. They come back to me for their albums, so that was nice of them.
Hey.
Yeah, so that was cool. Just sort of, it was like an affirmation that I'd done a decent job at the time. But hard work. PR's hard work because you send out hundreds of emails and you get like 10 or 20% reply rate. So it's a lot of emailing.
I have done media relations in my time, and I'm glad that I don't do it anymore.
It's tough.
So yeah. I wanted to ask you at the beginning, like how has it been keeping that going in such a changing media landscape in a place where really even kind of legacy media people don't want to pay anything for? Yeah. Is it passion? Is it having a good team?
Passion and having like a team of people who would just really love it, I guess.
That's the only thing that's kept us going, really, and like favors from people. And like, I suppose like that's why I do the PR as well, in a way. It's like that kind of funds my passion in a way. PR in a way, a bit like music journalism. It's like it's going to change in the next 10 years anyway, because you got like things like AI, you've got things like you've got all these platforms that are springing up where you can just submit music to it. So in a way, I feel like we need a new solution rather than just like emailing people all the time. You know what I mean? And I guess it's like building relationships with them, really. Because that's the main thing, isn't it? Like whatever you're doing, if you're working in music, then if you get to know other people who are working in music, then let's do something together. It's that kind of thing, really, rather than I'm pitching you. It's so much better when you meet people who are also into music, whatever way that is.
Yes.
Fran, any other death and shagging stats or anything else that you want to add?
No, I can email you if you want me to. I can have some sort of a monthly newsletter. But no, thank you for listening to the podcast. I'll try and dig into some more go-betweens, and INXS had some hits before Kick, guys. Check him out. And thanks again, Bill, for coming on.
Cheers.
And till next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and thanks again to our guest, Bill Cummings. For further listening on the band INXS, why not listen to Don't Change? I think we mentioned that. Also check out The One Thing, Just Keep Walking, and Disappear are my top picks. If you want to recommend any other songs by either band or some future topics for us to chat about on the podcast, please get in touch with us. We are on social media, but where are you? Well, we're currently on Twitter /X at OU Music Pod, and the same on Blue Sky. Or you can find us on Instagram at overunderatedmusicpod, or you can even send us an email at overunderatedmusicpod@gmail.com. Until next time, guys, goodbye.